Hey guys, okay, today's video is going to be reacting to Why Did Soldiers Fight in Lines? Animated history by, of course, Armchair Historian. Um, my theory is I think it just helped with morale. Well, one of the reasons being it helps with morale. You know, you're standing right next to two of your fellow soldiers, and then there's a third guy right behind you, and maybe a dude right in front of you. You're not gonna run when you're standing like right next to someone, right? Um, and then another is the way the guns worked back then. Obviously, it took time to reload those guns. So if you stand in a line, you can do a mass volley. Those are literally my only two reasons for it, as I am not a I am not a 1600s to 1800s historian, as I've stated multiple times, which time period I study, and yet I feel like a lot of people don't pay attention to that and expect me to be knowledgeable on all things. It's impossible. Anyways, enough of that tangent. Let's go ahead and hear animated history, or well, Armchair Historians theory or thoughts, or perhaps facts.
And History with Hilbert for collaborating with me. He'll actually be narrating some of this video. Be sure to check out his channel, the links in the description below. When a modern audience sees 18th century warfare in film or television, such as in The Patriot, the question that first comes to mind is, why are they just standing in lines and firing back and forth? And while they really should be asking themselves, why am I even watching The Patriot? The first question
It's it's a not a good movie per se, but it's an enjoyable action movie, right?
is still a valid one. Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian, and today we're
Like,
going
definitely
to
don't
discuss
watch
the
it if you
infantry
think there's
formations
historical
in the
accuracy
18th
in it.
and
There
19th
isn't.
centuries
Just watch it for
and why they were
the
employed.
bloodshed, I guess.
But first, a word from our sponsor, Ironside. Ironside is a computer company that specializes in making high-end.
Make ready. Present. Fire.
In order to understand why soldiers fought in lines, it also must be understood how line formations and tactics were even developed, and for this we have to go back to the early 17th century. The man primarily responsible for the widespread introduction of linear formations in Europe was Gustavus Adolphus II, King of Sweden during this period. Up until that time, infantry was deployed on the battlefield in large square columns of pikemen and musketeers, which allowed them to move around the battlefield as one unit and provide equal protection to each flank. Inspired by a system developed by the Dutch nobleman Maurice of Nassau, Gustavus implemented formations designed to maximize firepower. As stated by David Gates in his book Warfare in the 19th Century,
shallow linear formations were clearly more advantageous than deep columnar ones when it came to maximizing the number of troops who could see and thus shoot a given target.
As a result, the Swedish army was highly successful in the 30 Years' War. While Gustavus's system worked, it was not flawless. In the words of Professor Archer Jones, author of The Art of War in the Western World,
Gustavus's scheme had one important drawback: its lack of all-round protection provided by the formations based on the square. A line that could only face one direction meant vulnerable flanks and an assailable rear.
This, however, would be remedied by the introduction of the bayonet, a short blade that could be attached to the end of a firearm, which allowed infantrymen to fend off cavalry charges without pikes. Bayonets were probably invented early in the 1600s, but did not become widespread until the 1670s. Although at first they had to be inserted into the barrel of a firearm, this was solved by the invention of the socket bayonet, which allowed a musket to be fired with the bayonet attached. Combined with the development of lighter, more efficient muskets, a company of infantry could protect itself from almost anything. Although soldiers were better equipped than they had ever been, it was still more efficient to fight in line formations. This was for a number of reasons. First and most importantly, the only way for infantry to repel cavalry charges was by staying in formation. When infantry was not in formation, they were especially vulnerable, as this meant that each man's flanks would be unprotected and exposed to cavalry. Second, it was easier to maneuver large numbers of men in a rigid formation, as otherwise they would have been separated and disoriented, especially in the smoky environment on the battlefield, making them an even better target for cavalry or enemy infantry. Third, as muskets were very inaccurate, the only way for soldiers to inflict damage on their opponent was by concentrating all of their fire on one target. Combat in this era was more about intimidating the enemy and forcing him to retreat from the battlefield, and this was often accomplished by bayonet and cavalry charges. These points were recognized by military theorists and generals in the 19th and 18th centuries, and as a result, linear formations were used for over 200 years, and this was doubly ensured by the technologies of the time. Again, quoting David Gates,
"At the end of the 1700s, many of the features of ancient warfare still seemed to be present. Smoothbore guns had neither much more accuracy nor reach than the slings, bows and ballistae that they superseded, while for close fighting, manual weapons, swords, bayonets and lances were commonly relied upon."
That said, linear tactics were continuously being improved upon, with various drills being developed in order to increase rate of fire and survivability. For example, the infantry square, which solved the fundamental problem of linear formations, the vulnerability of their flanks to cavalry charges. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British used the square formation to great effect, most notably at the Battle of Waterloo, where companies of British infantry broke multiple French cavalry charges by forming square. Another significant innovation was the development of light infantry, who were trained to spread out and conceal themselves in order to harass the enemy and screen the primary battle formations, while remaining safe from cavalry. Despite these developments, it became clear that linear formations would eventually become obsolete with the development of more accurate firearms in the 19th century. In the American Civil War, for instance, one of the reasons for increased lethality of combat was the use of static line formations against highly accurate and deadly munitions, such as the mini-ball. These new weapons could also disrupt cavalry charges at long distance, which
So far, I think I've been one of my guesses. I think has been proven right. I guess when he said that whole intimidation tactic, right? The idea of the low accuracy of the guns, you get a bunch of people lining up and shooting at one target, more likely to hit said target.
Diminished the use of both massed infantry formations and cavalry alike. Regardless, lines continued to be used in some capacity up until the First World War. Despite the prolific casualties suffered by units in close order formations during the start of the First World War, it should still be understood how effective line formations were in their heyday, because as we've previously stated, they proved to be a major deterrent against cavalry, kept much needed order and discipline within the ranks of the thousands of soldiers on the battlefield, and allowed armies to channel a high volume of fire into the formations of their enemy. In spite of all of these points, linear tactics eventually succumbed to the inevitable obsolescence of any method or technology. And speaking of technology, I want to give a big thank you to...
Is that the end of the video? Yes, that is the end of the video. Let's end it with a look here at this weapon. I agree for the most part, but I feel like he definitely could have gone more in depth. Now, it is an older video, so I will give him some slack. This is, I think, back when he was just starting to blow up, because this is 2018, so it's really old. For the channel, I believe. But I do think there was certainly that idea of morale. I've heard that argument used before. It's kind of why, you're not gonna it's what the Romans used, right? When they went into line formation, the idea of their legions or whatever, however they organized themselves, whatever it was called. It was the idea of you're standing next to someone and then you've got the veterans behind you. Those new people at the front, they're not going to run away because they don't want the people behind them to get mad at them. And they don't want their buddies that are standing next to them to also get mad at them. But otherwise, good video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Leave a suggestion down below for what you want to see me react to next. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.